Hello and good evening, guys. This is Jordan Boyd. I'm actually having a lot of technical difficulties doing this. So the best way I can do this is recording on my phone and putting the PowerPoint in front of me as you see. Sorry about this. It's just very difficult for me to do right now. But let's get started. My movie review is over Copperhead in 2013. And all in all, I thought it was a pretty good movie, but we'll get into that later. To start off, let's look at the story. It's a story about an upstate New York family clash over the views of the Civil War. It's mainly a lot of Democrat versus Republican kind of thing. As we can see right here, Jeff, or Tom as he ends up going by later into the story, volunteers for the army against his father's will to try to impress a love interest, and it makes the movie kind of like a drama filled with a few twists here and there. It's very difficult, different story about what's going on and what to do. And to continue more with the story, it takes place during the Civil War, obviously, while the political parties are divided between Republican, who are pro-war at the time, and the Democrats, who are also known as the Copperheads and are anti-war. It's a Romeo and Juliet style of storytelling. A Republican girl falls in love with a Democratic son. The son leaves, fights in a war, try to seek the approval to marry her from her father. He ends up going missing, and someone ends up having to go and find him. That someone ends up being her younger brother. He goes down south after having an argument with his father about whether or not he should have enlisted in the army or not, and he ends up saying that to his father that he knows he's not a fighter, and ends up going down there to bring Jeff home to her. A little bit about the director. The director is Ron Maxwell. He was born on January 5th, 1949 in Clifton, New Jersey. He has many works, honestly, but some of his more prominent roles are The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia in 1971, The Parent Trap 2 in 1986, Gettysburg in 1993, and Gods and Generals in 2003. He is an American director and screenwriter, famous for making many accurate Civil War movies. This is actually his third best seller, surprisingly enough, with Gettysburg being his second and Gods and Generals being his first. Both were accurate Civil War movies. Historians say they were, at least. So he's got a nice little resume going for him. Capturing the historical events. First, we have the Civil War in general. They do a decent job about trying to see how things roll throughout all of it. The term Copperhead, they definitely use that a lot, hence why the movie is named Copperhead. And it does a very good job about saying that not everyone really wanted to be in the war and no one knew when it would end. That's actually something that they started talking about very early into the movie. And yeah, the nation was really divided into more than one way. It wasn't just north-south. It was Republican, Democrat, pro-war, against war, Constitution versus religion, many different ways of thinking throughout that time period. The enlistment of young men. There were, at one point, they said that they saw a 16-year-old end up getting shot and killed right in front of him. Very war-torn group. Families being torn apart, clearly, as the enlistment of young men. Lots of different views throughout the war, people fighting for both sides, families fighting for both sides. It's just a very different time. Families checking the board to see if their loved ones were dead. So they have a board that they would go around in towns and post the different the names of all the people that were deceased, missing, or injured in a battle on the town board outside of the church. Actually, there is a very good scene then where Jeff's friend walks up to the board and is looking for his name, doesn't see it, rushes to Esther's house where she is crying, wanting to know if there was any news about him or not, and there wasn't any at that time. There was just that he was missing. Of loved ones returning home and many asking questions only to get responses of trauma that they had gone through. There's a scene of them in I think it was kind of like a bar area, of one of the people coming home saying that he hadn't seen any of the other people that left with him in a while, but he did recall the Battle of Antietam, I believe. And no, it was a battle in a cornfield. It was a battle in a cornfield. And how they were ambushed and they had to run back through the cornfield, but he ended up getting his leg shot and was laying on the ground next to someone he had gone close to in the army, and was just laying there, tried to wake him up, and then realized there was a bullet hole through his eye. Like I said, it really does a really good job at capturing the events that happen, but it doesn't do it like directly. It does it through like a kind of backwater way. So they do, like I talked about down here, they do talk about the Battle of Antietam and how many lives were lost. We don't see any fighting really. The most conflict we see is just the growing conflict of people versus people in the town. There's no gunfighting, but there is a house burned down. We get countless reviews from IMDb, Politico, and Rotten Tomatoes about how the movie is getting really high. Movie got really high praise at the time, and I know ratings don't really show on Rotten Tomatoes, but there are a lot of good reviews down there talking about how good the movie was. It is a kind of romance drama kind of thing, so that definitely plays a big role into the ranking because not a lot of people like that. But it did provide us with a different perspective of everyday common life and what those people went through to protect their views, because Jeff's father ended up getting their house burnt down because of a riot that had happened, and it was just a very different time, and he responded by still sticking with his values and his core views about what he did and what happened. And like I mentioned before, the accuracy how many lives were lost in the Battle of Antietam, they actually gave us a number, and it was really close to what the actual losses of Antietam were. So they really did do their research coming into this movie. They really did do their best job that they could have done. The overall presentation of the film, I think it was really good. It was definitely a movie that I would recommend watching. Gave us a really good view of the common men and women's everyday lives, and what they had experienced and gone through in the Civil War, just being outside the war looking in. It did really well in the aspect of there's always a struggle of when you're waiting for your kids to return home, and a lot of different other different things. And it really did capture the time period it was trying to take place in. Like, as another professor we have here would say, it really captured the zeitgeist of the film or zeitgeist of the time period. And it was a very, very, very accurate representation. I mean, their accents were kind of bad, though. I'm not going to lie. Like, most times, actors can't really mimic an accent very well. Something I learned in this was, like, the term Copperhead. I didn't know that it meant what it meant. It was just, like, their way of saying that they were against the war and they were for the constitutional rights. It kind of makes them look a tad bit racist at times, too, though, towards, like, their own townspeople. The film was only given a $12 million budget, but it grossed $171 $740 in the box office. So I mean, all in all, it was kind of really successful. And then this is a quick little cast thing. They didn't have a lot of huge names in it. I mean, the people listed here were just like notable actors that you saw on the TV most of the time. Billy Campbell actually was just a returning actor from a former movie that he did. Angus McFadden actually starred in all of the Saw movies that have been out. So those two are really our main. He's our main male, and he's our male protagonist. He's our main male antagonist, or Angus is the male antagonist. So it really worked out very well. And then to close us out, here's a little quote from the movie that really stuck out for me. There's always a war that you read about in the newspaper. Then there's the war that is really out there happening. So now, I just wanted y'all to have this quote in front of you. It was towards the end of the movie this was said, and it really stuck out to me.